Right, so as you can probably tell from the title of the video, we're going to go through how to kind of get a grade 9. Now, it doesn't matter if you're in year 9 or year 8 or something like that, and you've got a test to do well on, this advice will still apply. It doesn't matter what kind of age you're at or what exam you're working on. But if you are in year 11 or if you're in year 10, you've got mocks coming up or anything along the lines, if you're watching this video 5 years from now, I don't even know if I'm putting this video out. It's currently like it's like, what time is it? It's 2 in the morning. I'm literally building TikToks, and I thought, why not make my first piece of long form content? And it will be about how to get a grade 9 now. I'm not here to sell you anything. All I want to do is just kind of get myself in front of the camera. I'm not even dressed for the occasion, right? But we'll talk about what you can do, the things you can implement, the habits to have, and how I might be able to help you. Now, this is the first piece of long form content on my page. I don't even think I'm going to put it out. I don't know if I'm going to edit it. But essentially, I'll write the notes as well. You can access these or just ask me for them. Socials are on here, anyways. Um, the first tip, and this is nothing new, I'm not really saying anything groundbreaking here, right? It's probably stuff you've heard of already from other YouTube channels or wherever, right? Or your schools have talked about this stuff. But when I was in school, I didn't really have this advice. Now, my big thing is I went from a grade 4 to a grade 8 or grade 7. Well, it was a 7 in maths, 8s and 9s in science. Now, we'll talk about specifically how I did that with maths and science in particular, right? Now, the first tip is the first key to doing well in your exams is active recall. Now, this is something you've probably heard of before. You're gonna have to mind my bad handwriting, right? I am tired. I didn't expect to be making a video. This is just what you've got to deal with, right? Now, active recall is something you might have heard of before, you might not have. Now, all it essentially means is just a more fancy way of saying to test yourself. Now, I'm a tutor. Um, I've worked with a lot of kids. I've gotten a lot of grade 9s, grade 8s, whatever grade they were going for, we've got it. Now, this is how I'm kind of showing you the blueprint here, right? Just copy it, just use it. Now, active recall is just testing yourself, right? Instead of like think of it of studies, I've got a revision guide here, right? Instead of just me thinking of putting this information into my head, what you want to do is just get a piece of paper out, write down what you remember from the top of your head, right? Instead of thinking of putting information into your head, think of it as taking that information out. Now, what this does is it kind of forms like stronger connections in your brain. You're forced to recall the information that you've learned in the past. Now, what you might do is just, like we said there, get a piece of paper out, write out everything you remembered, maybe in a different colored pen or something like that. Check your notes, write down what you missed. Do that a couple of times. You'll realize that what you forgot the first time, you remembered it second time. So that's one way you can use active recall. Just we'll call this really the word we use when I'm tutoring is the blurting method. What I mean by this is just write out everything you remember. Get a different colored pen, write out what you missed after it. Do that a couple of times, and what you remember, what you realize is by the third time of doing this, you pretty much remembered everything about that one topic. Do that until you've remembered literally everything. Check over your notes, see if you remembered every single piece of information on there. Now, what are you really testing yourself on? Now, that's the first method, right? You're really using the specification. Now, you might have heard your teachers talk about this, right? Might not have. Essentially, all the specification is whether you're doing AQA, EdXL, whatever exam board you're using, right? It's a long list of everything you can possibly get asked about, right? Right, you might have them questions, especially in science, where you've read it, you've seen this question, and you thought, I've never heard of this thing before. I've literally never seen this before. The thing is, you have. They do like to hide the question sometimes, right? They're not there to trick you. It's just they cannot ask you something that's not on the specification. It's not that's not on this list. So essentially, what you've got to kind of do is, if you learn everything on that list, if you can test yourself on everything on that list, you can't get tricked out with these questions, right? And we'll get to answering exam questions too. Now, the way to kind of study effectively, right, to get the grades you want is active recall. Try the blurting method. Another thing you can do, this is one I highly recommend, right? There's nothing that I've done myself or that my students have done that come out better than this, right? It's using flashcards. Now, flashcards are easily the most effective, simple but effective, right? Right. The way to do this is we can make kind of three piles, right? Let's say you've done a topic. Let's say today I covered in a GCSE class, we did enzymes, right? Let's say one of the kids I taught today made 10 flashcards on enzymes, just for an example, right? So you might make three piles, just straw these spaces out, right? So let's say you did 10, and obviously you've just done that topic today, you're going to recall that information quite well. You'll be able to remember it. Now, let's say six of his flashcards, he knew straight away off the bat. He knew without like having to think, right? Now, two of them he kind of knew, he kind of struggled with, so that will go in the middle pile. Two, he completely forgot. Like he had no idea what these words. Now, what you want to do is just kind of ignore this pile and focus on the ones that you forgot. Now, do this in rounds. So your first round, you're just kind of putting them to where they belong. The second time you do this, right, repeat it, and what you'll realize is so really start with the ones that you struggled with, ones that you didn't know you were shaky on. Forget about the ones you did well. Now do this until all of the ones that you forgot are in that pile that you did really well on. Now your third time, just do it again. Use all 10 flashcards or however many you made, and just try that again and see if they are all still in that good pile. And do that a couple of times just for good measure. Now, this is easily one of the best things you can do, right? Just use flashcards. There's some flashcard apps you can use. Me myself, I'm not going to recommend you to do something I never did. Right? I never used Quizlet. One I did think was quite good was Anki. Now, I'm not getting. I wish I was sponsored by these guys, right? But Anki is a flashcard app. It was made popular by medical students, and the way I think of this is right. Medical students have a lot more content to learn than GCSE students. So if they can do it for their content, you can easily do it for yours, right? It's a flashcard app that incorporates something that we'll talk about in a second, spaced repetition. But essentially, Anki, it'll ask the questions that you got wrong more frequently. So the things that you're struggling with, you'll get asked about more often than the things that you know quite well. So it works, and it spaces out the things that you need to know over time. So the things that you're getting wrong will keep coming up, and the things that you did quite well on, they'll still ask you from time to time just to check on it to see if you still know that thing, right? Flashcards, blurting. Now, the key is with active recall, right? The reason why it's so effective, you're testing yourself, your brain's forming stronger connections, you're going to remember it better. But another thing is, in terms of studying, right? A lot of GCSE students, especially even myself when I was there, right? I didn't really know what to do. Like, there's some students that I've worked with that are quite like motivated to do well, but they don't really know how to go about it or what works, right? And they spend hours doing things that don't work. Like you might be reading, right? One thing you don't want to do is reread notes or writing up notes and things like that. There's no point, right? You could save yourself hours and hours of time, hours of revision. You can spend more time doing whatever you want to watch, whatever you want to do. Watch the shows you want to watch, right? In your spare time, because active recall is going to save you a lot of time, right? Just making these flashcards effective, and it saves you a lot of time. It don't take too long to do, right? Now, these are two things you can do. We'll keep it simple. We'll keep it at that for now. But essentially, you're testing yourself. Whether you want to ask a parent or a friend or family member to kind of test you, anything that's taking information out of your head, right? That you feel like you're testing yourself on. Now, the second key to this is spaced repetition. Now, I'm going to kind of glance over this one, right? Because if you do decide to use Anki, whether it's the website or the app, right? Anki incorporates spaced repetition for you. Now, spaced repetition is in the name what it is. It's just spacing out what you've learned over time, right? Where let's call today day one. I taught enzymes today, like I said before. So today's day one. This one of the students I taught. Let's say I taught you enzymes, right? You that's watching this video, I taught you enzymes today, and I was asking you questions on enzymes afterwards. Now, your recall of enzyme at day one after I've just taught it you is going to be pretty close to 100%. If you've just learned a topic, you're going to know that topic quite well. It's not 100%. Now, what I'm drawing here is the forgetting curve. The guy that kind of came up with this idea is called Ebbinghaus or something. I don't know if you've heard of the guy, right? I forget his name. But there's countless of studies that show that this works, right? Or that it's true, right? What these guys have found is that by day two or day three of learning this content, your recall of the topic. So here we've got time in days, right? Here we've got recall. It drops by about 50%. Now, let's say day three, you decide to go back over it. It goes back up to where it was before. You recall, shoot straight back up. Now, it drops again a little bit. Let's say day nine now, for example, will go back up. Drop again, oh, drops again, it goes straight back up. Now, this is quite exaggerated, right? But what you realize is the amount that your recall is dropping by every single time is smaller every single time. Like you're forgetting less. And the days that you actually have to go over the content is getting longer. You're spacing out over time. And over time, your brain's remembering more information than it did the first time. And all you're doing is doing these things over time, spacing it out. Now, depending on when your exams are, let's say you are in year 10 and you're starting, or you've just started year 11, you've got a lot of days until your actual exams. So you really have enough time to do this for every piece of content, for every topic. Let's say if we're talking about science or whatever, right? Now, they're the two most effective ways to learn the material, right? Now, the third thing that comes next, right, is answering past paper questions or doing questions per topic. And you can find these online. You can even ask me, literally just DM me. I want questions on this topic. I'll send them to you or whatever, right? Now, here is where you're applying your knowledge, right? It's the most important thing with science and maths in particular. One thing I always say: the more questions you do, the better your grade's going to be, right? Do as many questions as you can. Practice as many types of questions. So really, you're using the specification, right? Which, like we said earlier, is a long list of everything they can possibly ask you about. You use active recall to test yourself on everything they can possibly ask you about. And then you do past paper questions to apply that knowledge. You see how this works now, right? So past paper questions, what you realize is the stuff that you made in your flashcards is coming up. And it's like word. So the notes that I use in my lessons, right? I'm not here to sell you on anything, but if you want me to tutor you, then ask me, right? And I'll do that. But the notes that we use in our lessons, our students realize that it's word for word what the mark schemes say. So what I always tell my students to do is take notes in lesson, right, as I'm teaching it, and then make flashcards on the notes. And then flashcards that are made or the notes that we've been through are literally word for word what the questions are asking. It's literally that easy, right? Once you realize how, let's say for science, for example, right, if you realize what topic is asking you about, and you kind of annotate around the question everything that you remember about that topic, annotate all the key points around it, everything in your flashcards around it, right? And then you realize the things that you've annotated in the question is what's actually in the answer, right? This is the key. Just keep it simple, right? That's all you really need, right? Spaced repetition, active recall. So test yourself over time and do as many questions as you can. Apply that knowledge, right? Now, in terms of habits, I'm going to be quite quick with this one, right? You don't need to study for hours every single day, right? Do something that obviously push yourself, right? Try, if you do want to do well, do as much as you can, right? You don't want to burn yourself out, is what I'm trying to say. Half an hour a day, 45 minutes a day, or every other day is good enough, right? As long as you're consistent, right? Small efforts compound. Think of like atomic habits, right? If you're getting 1% better every day, you're 37 times better in a year. Um, really, just be consistent with it, right? You don't have to spend hours and hours studying. It's not something I did, and I did quite well. The students that I teach do quite well. They improve their grades massively, and they don't spend hours studying. And I don't tell them to. Just do these things, stick to it. Now, give yourself time to rest, right? As a student, this is probably the opposite of what you think. Make sure you get enough sleep. It's not easy as a teenager, right? Because I was there on my phone all night. Cut that down, right? It's going to mess your brain up. You're going to feel tired. You're not going to get as much out of your studying as you can. Drink more water. This sounds quite like straightforward, right? Just generic advice, but it's going to do you wonders, right? But this whole video, the whole idea was just talking about active recall, spaced repetition, test, and past paper questions. This is a method that works. It's going to help you do quite well. And I swear by it. Now, if there's anything else you guys need, I'm quite tired. I probably missed out a couple of things, right? But if there's any questions you have, either comment down below, message my Instagram, or wherever you can find me. My socials are listed on here, anyways, and I'll try. If you want these notes that I've kind of taken here, you can have them. Not the best thing in the world, but yeah, I hope that helps. So test yourself, space it out over time. Think of the forgetting curve. Do as many questions as you can.